couple of burning issues at the moment currently in Nigeria, especially facing the Nigerian worker. So the 2025 May Day celebration in Nigeria has been marked as a public holiday as declared by the federal government. Now, Thursday, May 1st, 2025 has been declared public holiday to commemorate Workers' Day. So the celebration, what's the purpose of the celebration? I'm sure you wonder, is to recognize the vital role Nigerian workers play in national development, fostering peace and stability, and advocating for improved working conditions. I'm sure this actually topped the chart in most of Nigerian workers' lips at the moment. Now, the Minister of Interior, Dr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, commended workers for their diligence and sacrifice, urging them to adopt a culture of innovation and productivity. He emphasized the importance of peace and driving industrialization and economic growth. The government reaffirmed its commitment to President Bola Tinubu's renewed hope agenda, focusing on security, economic empowerment, job creation, and of course, social stability. The celebration happening at the moment is expected to focus on addressing workers' welfare, promoting industrial growth, and enhancing economic development. Now, joining me this morning virtually from Delta State is Ambassador Adewo Egedebe. He is a political analyst and also a social commentator as well, and of course one of the major human rights advocates right here in Nigeria. Joins live from Delta State. Thank you so much for coming on board this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning and happy Workers' Day to Nigerian people.
Welcome. Right, happy Workers' Day to you too. And I also have Suprila Membrem, a political analyst, joining live right there in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Happy Workers' Day.
It's nice to be here, and happy Workers' Day to Nigerian workers.
Right. Now, let me quickly start with Ambassador Adewo Egedebe. Now, for an average Nigerian worker, what really is the significance of this celebration happening today?
Well, yes, as it is expected, it is to acknowledge workers' contributions, to society. And of course, promoting the rights of workers. That's the significance of this day, among other things. The Nigerian worker ordinarily ought to be very pivotal in the development of the Nigerian state in terms of contributing a quota on a daily basis, and that has been happening, though not without some, skirmishes that one would say that yes, to a reasonable level, a number of Nigerian workers tend not to be very productive at the should be. But it's a day that is being set aside globally to honor workers, acknowledge their contributions, and of course, all of their bringing into the system for the betterment of, the nation. So to that extent, it's their day, and it's a day that we must celebrate. And it's also an opportunity to reflect on what is the significance and, working in tandem with its significant ability. That is, it is also to contribute their quota meaningfully and not the other way around. So it's a day that we need to reflect on how the Nigerian worker has fared in terms of giving back to the society as a worker for which they earn her living at the end of the month. Then, of course, what impact has that brought to the system? So it's a day that will chronicle a lot of the things surrounding the Nigerian worker. Beyond the celebration, it's also a time to reflect soberly on how the Nigerian worker has fared and the need to improve on what the Nigerian worker has done so far. That's it for me.
Now speaking about reflection, I remember in a couple of years back, we had at days like this, you would see parade happening, in some parts of the state. But at the moment, we are having feelings that in some part of the state right here in Nigeria, we're not going to be having much of that parade happen in the stadium. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's expected because you will agree with me also, depending on wherever you are standing today, the excruciating hardship in Nigeria cannot be overemphasized in terms of, the take-home pay of the Nigerian worker. Then, of course, how is that able to, earn a living for the Nigerian worker? All of those are issues. He's a man that is a bit happy that we go out in the street to celebrate. Doing march past, parade, and all of that, there were things that were unfair that resonate with the Nigerian worker when Nigerian worker was truly Nigerian worker, when their plight was considered by government of the day. But of late, policies of government and programs of government has helped to stifle the Nigerian worker privileges and rights to a reasonable extent. So if some of the state workers are refraining from coming to do the rituals of march past and of course celebrating the Workers' Day in most of the state arcade as it was then you will not also blame those who are not so enthusiastic about the march past, the celebration, and all of those things that follow. It is as a result of the hardship. The cost of living today is is top notch in terms of the height of it. So the motivation to me is not really there as it were. But yes, the government has made a pronouncement as it was that today is Workers' Day, public holiday. So we are all observing the public holiday. But those who also demonstrate their sense of patriotism to want to also, do the rituals of march past and all of that is also welcome. But for those who do not see any reason in coming out to celebrate, to do the normal jamboree that is associated with Workers' Day, it's also within their right to stay back home and just mark the day.
Right. Now moving over to Shaprila Membrim. Shaprila, if you can hear me, coming down to you now. There's this normal saying, especially on social media, that says the cost of living is biting hard on the living at the moment. And aside some of the concerns of an average Nigerian worker currently in Nigeria, the issue of the welfare package, the cost of living, the minimum wage, the list is actually endless. Well, I'd love to ask, what's your rate, or how would you rate the current administration in terms of being intentional concerning the welfare of Nigerian workers at the moment? Shaprila, if you can hear me.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback, but yes, I can hear you.
Right.
So in terms of the commitments, in terms of the commitments of this administration, and when I speak of this administration, I speak of the federal government of Nigeria towards the plight of Nigerian workers is actually very poor. It's very poor at the moment, especially looking at the way the government has gone about implementation or the implementation of the national minimum wage, and also the consequential increments of that implementation. As you know, the minimum wage entails that once the minimum wage is paid, there also has to be a consequential increment on that minimum wage or on what is being paid, which we are not seeing at the moment, which is not being experienced at the moment. And again, going further, if you look at it from the perspective of what the Nigerian worker is going through in terms of the cost of living crisis, one can say that what is being offered by the government is just a paltry sum. And in terms of also welfare of the Nigerian workers, especially at the federal level, it's not something that we would say we would rate the government high on, especially with issues of benefits, pension payments of pension, especially timely payments of pension. We have incidents of Nigerian workers having to grapple with payment of pensions almost 1 year after retirement before they get access to their pensions. And those pension deductions are being made, at every pay. And if you look at it, especially with the implementation of the minimum wage, you find out that the so-called wage award, which is 40,000 naira wage award, is what is being paid as a flat rate up until now. In fact, some subnationals have moved forward to implement consequential increment on the minimum wage. So I would rate the government very poor. And also, with the cost of living crisis, the government has not led by example in terms of cutting costs. When I mean cutting cost of governance in terms of the flamboyance that comes with the executive arm of government. And also, in fact, with every other arm of government, apart from the judiciary, the government has not done a lot. So you can't ask workers to sacrifice on one hand, and on the other hand, you're living in flamboyance and you're living in, in comfort while others are living in abject poverty. So I would say the government, especially at the federal level, has performed extremely poorly. In fact, the presidency went as further as to admit to this fact tacitly by saying federal workers should get other jobs to do. They should engage in other trades. I mean, that is the presidential spokesman saying that. So the federal government is also tacitly admitting that the welfare of workers or whatever workers are being paid is not enough to sustain them. So if we are having workers diverting to doing other jobs to be able to survive, then what is the fate of the civil servants, especially the Nigerian bureaucracy and other agencies, ministries, departments, and agencies of government? So these are the issues, and this will I say this also buttresses my point that even the government is aware that whatever welfare package they are giving to the Nigerian workers, especially those at the federal level, is paltry, insufficient, and in fact, I dare say insignificant at the moment.
Can you hear me? Moving back to Adewo Igedebe now, he said something about being sufficient, that's the minimum wage. And I remember vividly last year how the labor unions, the TUC president and members, Festus Osifo, the NLC president, Joe Argerel, how they went back and forth with the federal government in trying to hit it on a particular amount that could suffice for some of the things going on in Nigeria at the moment affecting the workers. And at some point we saw the 70,000 naira minimum wage being agreed. Now the question is, do you think the labor unions did enough in trying to fight for the Nigerian worker?
Super question for answer on a day like this. My simple answer is absolutely no. No, in the sense that the union, the labor union, the trade union, and all the affiliates today in Nigeria has become more political than being, objective. So, and to that extent, they are hardly taken serious in spite of all of their threats, all of their shutdowns here and there, because they become more political, other than their real advocacy tool that they should be, deploying to engage government objectively on improving workers' conditions. This has not been very impressive. Addressing labor issues from the front of, the unions has not been very effective in recent years. And the reason is because they are tilting towards politicians. So their originality of bureaucracy is no longer in force. So to that extent, politicians see them inside out, and whatever they are threat, they just wave it with a wave of hand. If not, as of last year that this minimum wage was signed, today, I'm aware that there are some states and there are some parastatals that they may not have been, implementing this all important minimum wage that was much requested for. So to that extent, the Trade Union Congress and its affiliates have not done so well. I just believe that on a day like this is a day we need to reflect on that, and for them to sit back and do what exactly the reason why they were established. Other than that, then they will be termed as good for nothing. But we cannot give up on them yet. We also believe that something good is possible, which is why we need to bring these issues to the fore by ensuring that we get labor unions to stand up, LLC to stand up and stand by their word, engage government objectively. You don't subject people calling them out after debating a lot of conditions you bring before the federal government. They will come, state their own side, you state your own side, and at the end of the day, implementation is near zero. So that we don't need to encourage going forward. So I call on the labor unions to wake up to their responsibility by engaging government beyond those tripartite meetings, the aftermath of those meetings. What is the implementation level? And beyond labor union, I would like to switch quickly to the National Assembly that have oversight function of all executive arm of government and other auxiliaries. But today, the National Assembly is not even looking at the plight of labor. So holding governments and the executive accountable for not implementing all of those wages that have been agreed upon. So there's a whole lot of failure across board, not just the workers, Because without the bureaucracy, the National Assembly cannot function, even the executive cannot function, nor the judiciary can function, the three arms of government. But these same people that will walk across the three divides, they go home with paltry pay at the end of the day. And my other colleague there, I allude to the fact that, quoting the spokesperson of the president saying that, oh, that Nigerian workers can even do side work. What is that? That would be a divided attention. The Nigerian workers can no longer concentrate because they have a divided attention. So all of this must be well emphasized on a day like this with a view to profiling a workable solution to our local problems. I've always considered the Nigerian problem as a local problem that desire a local solution, which is, among other things I've said, National Assembly standing on the oversight function to engage the executive to implement all of the agreed, agreements from both parties per time. And the Nigerian workers should do that which originally established to do, and not play politics with the plight of people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that amazing submission. But joining me right now in the studio to take the conversation even further is Kadiri Bashiru. Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you so much for having me. The Lord will bless our workers for a hard job keeping Nigeria as a country of strong future.
Absolutely. Now, with the current situation bedeviling the country, with a lot of Nigerians facing or having different challenges at the front burner, do you think an average Nigerian has lost faith in our labor unions?
First, let me thank ITV for always being there for the workers of Nigeria, giving us a platform to share our thoughts and to look at the past with preparation to work hard to change the future for a better working group. Now, having said that, I must tell you that lamentation is not the answer to problems. And that has been one of the challenges I have with a lot of our people when we keep lamenting and lamenting. Of course, we've been lamenting for over how many years, and where are we? So, but I think what is important is that challenges makes us think out of the box and make us think even stronger. Today, May Day is designed for us to do both introspection and also to do a retrospection of what happened yesterday and how do we make a better Nigeria for the future and even today. But I must tell you the truth is that it has not been an easy task to journey. If you remember, 1886 is a historical reference of this Workers' Day in reference from the United States of America, where workers converged to say, look, we must change our own destiny. Nobody will do it for us. And that spirit is still what I think we should be driving what we are doing. Nobody will do it for you except you do it yourself. The story of people are going to begin to help us. No, let's do it ourselves. Take the lead, others will follow you. Now, the Nigerian experience is that our economy is currently in a challenge. And the practical truth is that our economy is not managed by our country. That's what I feel. I may be wrong. Because if it's managed by our country, then the resources in our country can change our narrative, and very clearly too.
But when you say our economy is not managed by our country, it gets somebody actually worried and thinking, because we have a president, we have a vice president, we have Minister of Finance, and the list actually is endless. So make that make sense.
Yeah, can I tell you this for free? Another one more. There's a difference between what we call placeholder and leading a system. I must tell you, today is Workers' Day, and so by our training, we have to tell ourselves the black truth. The West is still in the jugular of Nigeria. And like I said, it's not lamentation, it's for us to re-examine how do we drive our economy. Today, the oil in our country, the price is determined by the West, not by us. So how do you explain that? Your major economic source is the oil. And the oil in your land, somebody else determines the price of how he will buy from you, and how you will sell to him. And Oluwapo, I don't know whether that is a theater, but I think that is what is going on. And several of the natural resources in our country, the prices are determined by the West, not by us. So they decide when the price will do and when the price will come down. I am not undermining the capacity of the president, but I am saying these are the realities. And so the time has come for us to reflect as a country that have the capacity and have the resources to manage and to drive our economy. If our economy is strong, nobody will be asking you to come and give me X amount of money on a regular basis. If the currency is powerful, hey, you can't tell me that in the 80s, I was a young man growing, the cost of buying a trouser material far back 1974, 75, 76 was 50 kobo and Oluwapo. And then you just imagine, compare that now. The Nigeria exchange rate and Oluwapo was 0.6 something naira, which means that naira was stronger than dollar. No, how do you explain this? Today, naira is 1,600 naira. That is what it is today. I don't know whether I'm wrong. And that is the reflection. So when the capacity of your currency is in the canvas, so who manages your economy? When the determination of pricing for your product, which you produce from your own end, your raw material from your end, determined by somebody else, who manages the economy? When the price of buying is somebody else's determination, who is the owner of the economy? When you are the owner of the raw material, you will tell me you own the raw material, and then somebody tells you how much you will buy it from you. You have no input as to how that price will come. And then the same people will tell you how much they will sell to you when they finish the product.
But don't you think all of this actually is going on because we are more of an importing country than an exporter nation?
Now, that is the issue. Now you are coming to where I'm talking about. That is the issue. Why are we still standing still? Why are we so retrogressive? Many years ago, we have so many factories in Nigeria. They've gone into coma. We had not less than 75 textile mills producing materials. They went into the canvas. IBM left Nigeria. Today, they are not here. And several others. So tell me who manages the country. And everything you consume and use here, almost everything is imported. So how do you explain that?
Now
when yesterday we were exporting textile materials to other countries.
And here we are today. Now let's quickly do the math. So last year, the federal government finally agreed with the labor unions on the 70,000 minimum wage. And judging from some of the calculations you made, taking us back there in Nigeria where you sold a piece of material for 50 kobo and how the naira was stronger than the dollar. Do you think 70,000 naira minimum wage is enough to suffice for a family of 5? Now, I actually read a report where they were trying to have, you know, some similarities and differences between a 30,000 naira minimum wage in 2018 compared to a 70,000 naira minimum wage in 2025. Make all of this thing make sense. Do you think it's enough? What should be done at this point?
Now, first, before I go to respond to what you are saying, we must make our currency strong. We must take back our currency and make it strong, if it must have value in whatever we do. Now, today, if you divide 70,000 by 1,500.
Let's say 1,600.
1,600, beautiful, because it's been It's been on that,
Right.
yes. Now, if you divide that, that tells you how many dollars that a Nigerian worker earns at the minimum. And that also will tell you what is the capacity of his purchasing power in terms of consumption. That whole will tell you whether that is enough to pay his transport to work from home for 22 days, leaving 8 days as vacation, as their free days. Now, that also tells you whether that can afford him to buy a cup of rice or buy a rubber of rice for his family. That also tells you whether that one can afford him to buy a rubber of gari for his family. These are basic requirements. That tells you whether that can pay his bills, his light bills, can pay his water consumption, whether that can work on his medicals. Now, that will explain to you all of this position. Now, these are the indices or indicators of what a worker's salary should reflect. And when you are given a minimum wage position, you should reflect on these basics. Look at the house rent. How would the worker pay his rent, feed his family, pay his bills, transport to the office, and then still be a worker that is stable? Because your psychology is anchored on how you manage your home. Many a time, even when you are at work, once you reflect home, you are already in trouble. Your head is already in confusion. And then the few minutes that didn't happen, it will reflect on your performance in the job. That is why we always tell government that what you require is motivation. Let the workers be comfortable, both in their pay and in their work environment. You make them know that they are recognized and respected, and their creativity will come to fore. We have one of the best working class people in Nigeria. These people are extremely creative. But what has caused this problem is that they have been undermined, and they have been reduced to a point where they virtually think that tomorrow does not even exist, that nobody cares for them. How can I create wealth? And I, the wealth creator, don't even know how the wealth is managed. And nobody cares for me, but they only want me as a tool to get those wealth. And after that, I'm excused. Hey, how can I be creative? Creativity is not magic. It's the level of motivation that makes you creative. And I thank God for Nigerian workers who are still there, working hard in spite of all of this negativity. So I think the time today is for us to begin to now do a proper reflection. First is that I will tell government that these workers create your wealth. This is not in doubt. It's not a controversial discussion at all. This is a reality. Workers create wealth. The time has come for those who create wealth to also have the benefit of living well.
Absolutely.
So that they can create more wealth.
Of course.
Like I said, in comfort, creativity becomes super.
Definitely. We'll have enough time to dwell on all of the things the federal government should do moving forward. But let me move back to my guest who's right there in Delta State, Ambassador Adewo Egedebe. Now, let's talk about another major sector. So we have the informal sector right here in Nigeria. We have the unemployed sector as well. And we also have the underemployed sector. All of this, emanated actually in the Nigerian workers syndrome, I would say. But how far have the Nigerian government played in ensuring that unemployment rates in the country is reduced drastically?
The issue of unemployment, especially in the informal sector, is as a function of the lack of policy coordination, basically. Because if you look at government's policy towards employment in terms of, for instance, the fact that it's at the inception of this administration, it's sort of, slow-pedaled on the National Social Investment Program, which had employment components in it. It's slow-pedaled on it and sort of tried to reevaluate it. And reevaluating it to the point that it didn't get back to the vigor that it had.
Okay, let me move back to my guest in the studio. You want to add your own 2 cents to it?
Well, the issue of employment and unemployment, talking about the private sector driven economy, is also a function of fundamentally when the economy is stable, you can have all kind of creation that will give life to the private sector job creation. Now, many countries in the world are driven by SMEs. They are not driven by central government driver. These are all driven by SMEs, which of course are purely private sector initiative. And many a time, those things are done because the country's economy has some level of stability. And so the average private sector can survive and develop his concepts and drive it to a point where he's stable and he can produce for the future. Now, what that translates to, if you watch carefully, like if you watch many cars you see in Nigeria today, Japanese cars, they're not produced by just one organization. The different parts have different producers. They now assemble at a point, which means that those different part producers are also small producers who produce and bring and have a market. Now, you have a market that will uptake all you have produced, which means you are giving life to the smallholders, to the entrepreneurs who are private sector driven, and they make a lot of it. So when people watch them, others want to go there. The second is that Nigerian policy definition must be strict enough to define what we expect from you when you get facilities from government at the point of production. Now, our agricultural sector, for instance, you have smallholders who produce small, and that is what feed us, not the big players. Many a time, if you go to our market, like in Benin here, the market we go to, it's not the big player market. It's a supply by small holders. Is it banana, plantain, just mention them. They are smallholder farmers. These are private sector people. They're the one feeding us. So if you have that as a position, what I expect is that we should have a more structured economic management that will bring life to these smallholders, and that will encourage others to join them. For instance, in our agriculture, spoilage is one of the basic challenges of the smallholder farmers. Because why? Processing is not close by them. They have to travel a distance to process. And before they get there, the raw materials have gone down the canvas. They have got rotten, and then you can no longer use them, or they are reduced in value. And that gives discouragement to the farmers. The second is that the security subject matter is becoming a driver. And all of these issues are to be addressed fundamentally by government to give the enabling environment for private sector to thrive. Now, a lot of young men are going into the ICT, and I say, okay, ICT, connect ICT with agriculture and the market. Now, when you do that, you have also created a window for other people to invest. So for me, job creation is not just only government, but the biggest job creator would have been the private sector.
Right. Now, there are also those who would tell you that having an enabling environment to thrive would help you facilitate some of those policies.
That's what I'm saying.
Let me move back to my guest, if we still have our guest right there, Ambassador Edowo Egedebe and Sopriala Membrane. Yes, so let me quickly move over to you, Ambassador Edowo. Let's talk about workers' rights. How many workers even know that they actually have a right of being a worker in Nigeria?
Thank you. That's very important. And I will start by raising an issue with that young lady who posted recently, that young NYC lady who posted that she still receives a paltry 30,000, as her pay, having signed the minimum wage of 70,000 into law since last year. And when that lady posted that, she was tongue lashed by the worker, the average Nigerian worker, of course, the staff of the NYC. Now that's the problem. She was sunglass. Why did you do this? But you know, the backlash of that led to the implementation of the 70,000 minimum wage after over a year. So, to that extent, that is why I find the Nigerian workers culpable of even what she faces today. You don't just sit down and expect things to happen. When people talk about, oh, why the workers are doing so much, I agree that they are doing so much, but they could do much more. Because when somebody works and you get retired, your pension will not come to you after when due. I know a director in a very senior ministry that retired 4 years back, his pension has not been paid. How does that motivate the worker? Is an issue. Then, of course, because of that little girl crying out for what she's been facing.
Oh my goodness, I vividly remember that incident with the girl Ray, that's her name, and how she spoke out. And of course, a lot of NYSC court members actually celebrated afterwards. Right, but let me move over to Shaprila. Shaprila, if you are there and you can hear me, what do you think? Okay, great. Now, let's talk about the labor union and what their role is really in promoting the workers' rights right here in Nigeria.
So basically, when you talk about workers' rights, we always focus on the government and government workers. And I mean, it's actually expected, but also workers' rights in terms of the private sector workers. There is a Nigerian Industrial Court, which is meant to settle labor disputes. But labor disputes these days take almost forever to be settled and finalized. The role of labor union in settling this dispute is to act as a sort of advocate for workers. And for them to act as an advocate for workers, they have to be apolitical. They do not have to engage in behaviors or dispositions that tend to compromise them. Going further, Nigerian Labour Congress has to understand the basic arithmetics of economics, especially macroeconomics, so they can also advocate for proper economic measures to be taken. For instance, and there's also one notion I would like to even dispel, the fact that Nigeria needs a very, very powerful currency to show economic relevance or economic growth or economic capacity is actually a very wrong notion. Countries like South Korea, for instance, and the Nigerian naira actually has more value than the South Korean currency. But is Nigeria better than South Korea? No, we are not. You know, South Korea is among the top 5, top 10 economies globally. It's a function of productivity. That is where the focus of labor unions should, in terms of policy advocacy with the government. You know, the labor unions should focus on proper policy articulation and advocacy to the government, so that you sort of steer government towards the right direction, rather than dwelling on frivolities, dwelling on things that really do not matter. I mean, advocacy for a living wage matters, and the rest of that, legal framework, policy frameworks. But over that or beyond that, we have to look at a more structured approach towards tackling this issue in the long term, which is what, advocating for productivity. Labor unions should agitate towards government embarking on policies that are productive. Also, issues of public infrastructure, which is one area that we are not looking at, usually when we talk about workers' welfare. For instance, if there's a functional public infrastructure in place, you would find that workers will spend less commuting from their home to the place of work. For instance, you find that workers pay through their teeth to live in city centers, places that are not within their means, maybe the level of their level. For instance, if it's a civil servant, someone that works in the bureaucracy, is a level 8, level 9, civil servant probably can't afford an area around the central business district of Abuja or Lagos. Would have to live at the periphery or the suburbs of that city. But for that to function, there has to be a functioning public infrastructure to support that. Public transport system that supports, the civil servants so that he or she can be able to commute from point A to point B. So you see, that way it makes the civil servant also save more. And I'm just talking about civil servants. I'm also talking about workers also in the public and private sector. It will encourage them to save more. So what I'm saying is that the labor unions need to look at a more constructive and also futuristic approach towards these issues. Areas of policy advocacy. And when you talk about policy advocacy, you look at economic policies, productivity, you look at focus on agriculture, you look at focus on public infrastructure, you look at a whole plethora of issues. That way, you find out that you keep more money in the pockets of workers. And then, they're able to retain. And that's the way you also retain value of currency. You do not keep on increasing minimum wage. Because again, when you increase minimum wage constantly and there's a lot of money circulation, it also causes issues of inflation and, God forbid, stagflation. So we have to look for a way to be able to support our system and that's where we have labor unions, because labor unions are also advocacy groups, they are pressure groups, and the rest of that. So
Absolutely.
that's the perspective to which I think labor unions should come, engage constructively, so you don't look like a bandwagon of people that are now looked at as people without direction and the rest of that. I'm not saying the labor unions are without direction, but I'm saying that there's a way to further fine-tune their method of approach and their also method of engagement with the government. Also, litigation is also part of it through the instrumentality of the laws.
Right, of course, the list actually is endless, and of course, news actually has it that just like every other May Day, NLC have 3 demands, they're demanding from the federal government. Let me move back to Ambassador Edewo, if you are still here with us, as we tend to... Right, as we tend to wrap up the conversation at this point. So we've seen all of these things happen. It didn't just begin today, but in your own observation, what are some of those tactics you've observed that a lot of Nigerian workers have had to embrace just to go with the slide and adapt to the realities on ground in Nigeria?
Okay, yes. When the federal government came up with this policy change that brought about the naira value, depreciating the more, and of course, when the take home of the every Nigerian worker can no longer take him home. I understood at that point where the federal government said, a grade level, I think level 04 to level 10, to be coming to work twice or thrice in a week. All of those are measures they put in place. I do not know how sustainable is that, so that will also have a way of, helping their transport allowances. That was the strategy they brought side by side with the height of things. That, I believe, should be encouraged. Then, of course, the use of technology. There are some of these jobs the civil servants can do from the home front. And so that can also help as a way of strategy to mitigating against the high, in cost of transportation. Because for somebody that is receiving 70,000 as a minimum wage, maybe the level or 04, for instance, and transport takes more than 40,000 naira for the 20 days as he or she goes to work, then what is left, for him for the upkeep? So those are issues. But I think that the reliance on ICT becomes very paramount as one clear way, to deal with the issue of high cost. Then another thing I want to quickly suggest is that, federal government, there is this low-cost housing that we used to have before now that takes care of the interest of workers. That in a low-cost housing estate, a worker is sure of having his own house, and the money is deducted within the cost of service. That gives, job security, and it encourages the worker to work for the country and work for herself by extension. But all of these things don't seem to be, visible any longer. So I'm saying that they should be reinvented in the coming days. Let all of these things that worked before be brought back. If they are brought back, I think it will help to, encourage the Nigerian worker much more. And also, like one of the discussants mentioned earlier, that was one of my thoughts, that
Now let me move back to my guest in the studio, Mr. Bashiru. I feel like one of the major things we've not talked about this morning is the issue of brain drain. Nigeria is currently experiencing significant brain drain, with many skilled workers seeking for better opportunities abroad. And recently, a particular state government came out to have this wonderful policy for medical practitioners in the state and said you'd have to, and did say that you would have to sign a bond for a couple of years to be with us, just in case you want to jackpot, as the case may be. Do you think that's the solution in solving main brain drain?
Now, let me tell you this. Even the idea of trying to jackpot, it has some slavery tendencies.
But you get better opportunities.
Just a
there.
moment,
Right.
you know, I know you are in the modern world, so you can be talking like that. Now, there will be no country if all of us had jackpot. When the coup, 1966 coup came, Nigeria would have been empty. There are several other coups that came. Nigeria would have been empty. Everybody would have just been gone. You would have woken up one morning and there was no Nigeria. People kept this country running in spite of the challenges. Today I mentioned to you that lamentation is not the answer to problems. It's only keep you far behind success story. And those challenges should wake up your intellectual content to be creative. What has happened to us is that everybody wants it and want to run away. Run to where? And where you jackpot to, who are you there? Do you have any dignity as a person? A lot of Nigerians that travel, they will tell you what they experience. But out of shame, they won't come back home. If 200 travel, about 100 and something of them are in trouble, they can't come back home. Hey, where is your dignity? I've told myself, never I will I travel. If I'm traveling anywhere, I'm going there as an expert. You invite me, I will go talk, and I will come back to my country. Because your country is not my country. Today, you can hear the stories of Donald Trump and co. What they tell everybody. It's enough for us to go back and rethink. Japan didn't jackpot when they faced the Second World War. Japan were in the canvas, Second World War. And you know what they did? They closed their doors. For 10 years, nobody was going, no one was coming out. And they said, look, we either die here or we make our country a country. Today, Japan is one of the strongest technology country in the world. There's hardly any home you don't find Japanese product, whether in calculator, whether in cars, or just mention them. You hardly can find. China was in the canvas in the 80s. China didn't leave. Today, China is the people who want to come and invest in their country, even in Nigeria. Nigerians must wake up. We must change our narrative. That our intellectual power, let's invent it in our country. I agree leadership is important, but you cannot run away and change the leadership in another country. Other countries have their leaders and they change their leaders and they have a direction. So for me, what is important here, my dear, is that first is that we must sit down in our country and change our narrative.
Absolutely.
We cannot continue to run away to somebody else's country. And when you get there, bringing your intellectual material, the next thing the guy tells you that you are not from here, Jack, you have to remember that you are a stranger. You know the tax you pay is forbidden.
Now, as we tend to leave the conversation here, let me have your message, because I know you've been actually eager enough to talk about some of the things the federal government should do at this point moving forward. So what would be your message to the President Bola Tinubu's administration?
First, Mr. President, I will advise, take our economy back. Take our economy back and make our economy strong. The responsibility to give Nigerians a fine economy is now in your hand. Mr. President, remember, you were part of the protesters that brought democracy to be. Democracy was supposed to bring us a better future and a better Nigeria, where our economy makes sense, where our politics is within the bracket of the average Nigeria, where the social life and security is driven by government deliberate policy to make sure that Nigerians live a happy life and a prosperous society. These are fundamental, Mr. President. Take our economy back and make our economy strong. If our economy is strong, I'm not too sure that you will have too much headache that you are having now. Now, the second, the benefit of your subsidy removal should reflect on the average Nigerian home. I'm not just saying pause, home. Subsidy gone, beautiful, with all the stories around it, with all the stories of criminals and all of that around it, beautiful. Today, Nigeria now shares a fraction trillion on almost every other month as FAC, at FAC level. Now, which is a far surge to what it was, that was 700 and something and 800 and something billion in the past. Mr. President, that fund should reflect the life of Nigerians. This is fundamental. Now, the second I want to mention, Mr. President, is to ask that the average worker's income makes sense, can take him home. What is currently on ground can't take the average worker home. It's simply like somebody waking up, borrowing on every month to survive. Mr. President, let the workers be proud to be Nigerian workers and not borrowers to survive. My other take is that for my colleagues in the Congress, the time to struggle and to fight is now. The beginning of all of this is that we must have our house together and properly articulate our policies. What was, of course, our Charter of Demand as a movement? The Charter of Demand. What is the Charter of Demand? Congress, I want to reclaim your indulgence. Let's take that charter and bring it back to life. The Nigerian workers are optimistic that the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress, call them the labor movement, can come back and make life better. The future of this country is anchored on a better working condition for the workers, because the average worker is the one who stimulates the macroeconomics of this country. If today there's no salary of the worker, the market women will raise alarm that their market, nobody is buying from them, because this microeconomics is the income that from the worker that runs that economics. Now, the piece that runs the system is when people, they are earning, can keep them and keep them alive. Today, the current earning of the average worker cannot keep him strong for too long. His future is even dangling as a threat to his children. It is important that we consider not just the worker you are seeing, but look at who are those standing and living on him. One average worker may have about 10 in the chain. Our community life as a people, we have a communal life where your cousins, your aunties, your uncles, your brothers, everybody is waiting for your income. And do you know, surprisingly, before you even know your salary has been paid, they're already aware. They're already calling you, brother, just to greet you and to thank you for yesterday, sir. Where, you know, but I don't want to greet you. When you say, I don't want to greet you, know that they're already eyeing that something is already happening. Right. And the next call you will get is that, brother, things are very hard, or whatever you can, just take and assist us. So if you look at that, so the average worker, the single worker you are seeing, have a chain of not less than 10, 5, 10 hanging on it. If you multiply that by number of workers in Nigeria, that explains to you what that translates to. In addition, is that worker you also paid. When he goes to the market to buy, the market woman who rely on he or her to make her earnings also have a chain of people waiting for her. And that explains to you, it's like you're looking at a V-shaped spread. And that explains to you the power and the enormity of that small pay you give to the average worker. So I want to crave indulgence of the President and Nigerian Labour Congress, and of course the TUC, that the time to reflect is now. My final take, which I think is important, is that my brothers in Congress, comrades, the struggle have just begun. The struggle has just begun. We must redesign our tactics and our strategies. If we must reclaim the comfort and the pride of the movement as it was many years ago, we must re-strategize and examine the policies and see how we can drive the average economy to make Nigeria a great country. The peace of this country is fundamentally dependent on the peace of the workers. If workers are at peace, this country will have peace. If they are not, this country is in danger. God forbid our country will have peace.
Amen. We need to make Nigeria a great nation indeed. I don't know if I still have Suprela Membrane here with me. Suprela, I'd love to get your message to Nigerian workers in all of this as we get to commemorate the May Day celebration.
Well, I commend them for their resilience, especially in the face of the crippling economic crisis, especially cost of living crisis, which is very much, or which was very much occasioned by, will I say, the whimsical and haphazard policy implementation of this administration, especially in terms of the removal of fuel subsidy and also the float of the naira, which later came back as managed floats after the crisis has already been lit. I commend them for their resilience. I commend them for their commitment. I commend them for their for their understanding, so to say. And going forward to the government is also very important because, the government shapes the society and the environment which we find ourselves. Going forward, the government, one of the most important things the government should do will be to focus on workers' welfare. You made mention of brain drain. Doctors are leaving. I saw the government talking about, was it 4 billion each teaching hospital and the rest of that, which is very important and is good for infrastructure development in those places. That's also part of the problem. But what do you do to stop doctors from leaving, from evaporating from Nigeria, right? You do that by taking care of their welfare. You do that by ensuring that they have a living wage. You do that by ensuring that there are infrastructure to support them working within the context of Nigeria, of the Nigerian society. Then also the fact that the government needs to score cheap economic points and economic metrics. The point is we should go down to the integrity of it, which is ensuring that workers, or ensuring that rather that the economy focuses on productivity, agriculture. We have to look for areas of advantage. Focus on infrastructure and manufacturing and backward integration, very important. Also, transparency in government finances. Look at NNPCL, look at refinery, the whole Warri refinery saga, and the whole is blending, is not blending, the rest of that. What we are seeing today. The point is that you can't ask workers to sacrifice whilst you're not able to sacrifice. You're living large. It's not done anywhere. And I'm talking about I'm not also talking about the federal government. I'm also talking about at the subnational levels, even down to the local government levels. Then, as I said earlier, focus on social mobility. It's very important that we look at moving people, poverty, to middle class, and also to, if possible, wealth creators.
Okay, Suprela, thank you so much. You said quite enough already. Now, finally, Ambassador Adewo Egedebe, my final question to you would be, what do you think should be the actual amount a Nigerian worker ought to take home every single month?
Okay, for me, at least a minimum of 150,000 can do some great deal in the current state of things. But having said that, I want to commend the Nigerian worker for their resilience in the face of these daunting challenges that has, affected them by the removal of subsidy and all that follows. Then, of course, I want to quickly, speak to the Trade Union Congress, Nigerian Labour Congress, and the activists to rediscover themselves and be very, very conscious of the times that we are in.
Right.
So their policies and programs to address the plight of the people are not set. And more also, the federal government, the state government, and the local government, and even the community level should go back to the Nigeria of the olden days where things were working. Nigerians can work better again. Because we must respect the failures of the past. That's my charge for everybody.
Absolutely. We really need to leave the conversation here right now. But I really must thank you so much, Ambassador Edewo Egedebe, for being a part of the show today. Thank you so much. And also Supralab membrane right there in Lagos. Thank you for your time as well. And happy Workers' Day and happy holiday to you. And of course, Mr. Bashiru, thank you so much for finding out time to be here today.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure being here.